Welcome back to Beyond Well Science. I'm Sheila Hamilton, and I'm so excited to talk with you today. Shaheed Days and Steve Jackson have taken what they learned as Academy Fellows at Yale University to their community in Philadelphia, and they've become mentors at Youth Move, nurturing the next generation of disruptive mental health visionaries. Hi, you two. It's so good to have you on the line.
Hey there.
So, Shaheed, just give us a little bit of background about how you became so interested in this idea that we could be disruptive around how we deliver and treat people with mental health issues.
Oh, man. I would start with my lived experience, with just how I was raised. I think fundamentally, just the way I was reared by the family who took me in foster care, and just the principles that they instilled in myself and my siblings around community and around defining community for yourselves and never really settling, whether it's for the status quo or kind of writing people off because they have particular issues. My family or my siblings and I, we came from a lot of really hard issues that you would say some families don't recover from, and that devastate communities. In this particular case, my grandmother or foster parent, I will call it Margaret Davis, and grandfather Willie Dargan, they decided to see past that. And they decided to see generational value that they hadn't witnessed before. They didn't know it was kind of instaured and taken us in. And I feel like as I accepted that and moved into that emotionally, mentally, and spiritually as I grew older, I figure that's the way in which I want to interact with my community and with generations that come forth behind me. I'm lucky to be afforded the opportunity to work with partners like Steve Jackson and others, let alone other young people who are courageously and boldly living their lives and would entrust me with encouraging and challenging them to transform.
Yeah, that's
to take
so
what it is
cool.
that they've lived, to take what it is that in a way stifles them, challenges them, and make it work for them. Turn it into kind of your greatest ally in discovering yourself, the biggest value you can have in your community, your family, and even within yourself. I would say that's the genesis of all this for me.
I want you to come speak to so many organizations already, Shaheed. Can I ask you what age you were entered into the foster care system, and were you given a traditional diagnosis?
I entered at the age of 2, and around that time, went through a lot, especially around behavioral health services, being placed on psychotropic meds. If I'm to be truly honest, because of the medications I was on, I cannot recall most of my life or any of those processes that led to being medicated for a period of time. But depression, anxiety, anger, and probably PTSD somewhere in there that I feel that were a part of my diagnosis as a kid.
And Shaheed, have you moved to the point where you consider yourself living without a mental illness, or you feel like you may still have something somewhere along a spectrum, and you're coping with it in a completely and entirely different way than the pharmaceutical companies would have suggested?
Got you. That's a great question. For me, I don't claim a mental illness for myself at this age. I am proactive about what I feel like are cycles in which I go through regularly. That includes feeling anxiety or depression around a particular thing, rather than kind of taking on those labels and a lot of the stigma and or issues around that, which don't really resonate with me. I really take on the proactive approach. And so I would say around the age of 15, 16, I was introduced to the idea of meditation. I was introduced to the idea of controlling my breathing, yoga, and other things, of which I took on for years at a time after that, and experienced kind of like a profound shift for myself emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and also in relationship to others. I think that a remedy for me, and not so much a cure-all, but something that helps me feel like my sense of ease is having a role, or kind of like developing a role for myself in my community. It's feeling connected to people. I think the onset of kind of like my sense of being depressed or anxiety or other things likely came from feeling rejected, feeling without.
Yeah.
I don't know my biological family, and so that's probably a
Yeah, it has a great deal to do with it. And thank you, Shaheed. I think that when we began to talk about why Youth Move and these Let's Lead programs are so effective, these personal stories have so much resonance for people. So thanks for sharing that. Stephen, would you share equally in terms of your lived experience, just enough so that people listening can get an idea of where you come from?
Absolutely. First, just want to say I'm so honored to be friends with someone who's I think not necessarily so interested in like pioneering anything that like a different dimension of the mental wellness world, but I think what Shaheed does so well is really like ground the work in what's natural, what's evolutionary, and what's spiritually like enriching.
Mm-hmm.
So as a friend, and as someone who's been able to work as a colleague to him, it's really just it's special to be able to walk the journey and grow and be challenged and try to envision more with him. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I similarly grew up in Philadelphia, and the family that I grew up in was dynamically interesting. I'm biracial, I'm black and white, and so didn't have much extended family that was accessible to a certain extent. Like, my mom's family, who's like white folks, they weren't interested in having a relationship with us, and even my dad's family was pretty strained in the beginning, and so grew up kind of like insular, but had two parents who were really invested in community. And so my mom did a lot of work in the Mount Airy section of Philadelphia to build relationships, to expose me to different things that were really powerful in terms of setting my culture. And then my dad was really instrumental in just showing me like what courage looks like when you do and take on like really like big, brave problems. He was someone who dealt with a lot in his childhood, and I know that he definitely was doing his best to transform a lot of what we spend time like thinking about and potentially diagnosing as being setbacks and things that'll hold you down. He poured in a legacy of relationship and community and struggle, and it really painted a picture for me of what community can do. And so my road into working with Shaheed actually came through. I started doing some public health and advocacy work here in Philly. I actually started around the time that my dad passed away about 8 years ago. I wanted to memorialize him, and so started a basketball mentorship program in the Kensington part of Philadelphia. And around that time, there was this big intersection in my life between leadership, mentorship, and sport. And Shaheed and I actually happened to meet about 3 or 4 years ago when that was really kind of taking off for me, and just found, a brother who I could be really creative with. And that, for me, one of the coping mechanisms that I use for, my own self-care is around creativity and being able to do like holistic storytelling, visualization. Shaheed mentioned meditation, but doing all that like in relation. And so spent a lot of time crafting what that looks like for me and experimenting and messing up and getting back up, and sharing as much as I can. And something that I've had conversations with Shaheed about a number of times is around like just giving it all away. And so not, you know, I'm not sure how familiar or how often, you know, you and your audience talk about, you know, business and entrepreneurship, but I am an entrepreneur, and one of the big things that happens, especially in terms of like mental health as entrepreneurs go, is you become relatively paranoid, and very isolationist. You know, you'll net only to a certain point until you think someone's trying to do this or that. And instead of having that kind of worldview and relational view, what I prefer to do, what's much healthier for me, is to give away as much as I can and just be very honest in my feedback around the relationship. It seems much more like multidimensional, instead of looking at it as like, this is just a business transaction. It's like we're walking this journey together.
Yeah.
And I'm going to share, and we just, you know, this is where our relationship is now. And let's build from here. You know what I mean?
Super cool.
And doing that similar to, yeah, thank you.
So Stephen, when you speak about this, I'm wondering, you know, what you're describing as I hear it is kind of creating this atmosphere of abundance. So a lot of these young people come in to Let's Lead, and they probably have not lived lives of abundance. So which of you want to talk about how you shift a mindset around that? Shaheed or Stephen, you want to take that?
I will say Let's Lead represents like multi-generational leadership. So you have folks who are like well-established in careers, may be master's level individuals, all the way to folks who are either undergraduate or not so far along in their careers. For our respective work with youth and young adults, of which our Let's Lead fellowship project was centered on, I would attribute their sense of like being disconnected, isolated, or tendency to isolate themselves. It's narrative. It's personal narrative.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, I mean, we can definitely generalize, and I would agree as far as your generalization goes. And if we were to get even granular, and just think of kind of like our own human condition. And that when things seem confusing or challenging, threatening, it's difficult to think of like something outside of yourself, something outside of your own preservation.
That's right.
A lot of our young people looking to preserve themselves, are they completely oblivious to community or the more or the abundance that's out there?
Yeah,
they're aware of it. However, they've been raised, programmed by narratives that say, hey, access to this for you looks like this because you're labeled as this or that.
Yeah.
And our young people, people in general, wind up disconnecting because that doesn't resonate with them. And we tell them, hey, this is, you know, our capitalist reward system that you have to kind of like participate in, or you have nothing. And if you choose nothing, you know, there's a whole host of stigmas that go with that. You're lazy. You're stupid. You don't have this, or you didn't have that. You're just a consumer. All these things, of which are narratives that our young people, I feel like, again, so courageously take on. And it ignites their resilience. And for those of whom where it's like, you know, it doesn't ignite their resilience and their lives are changed permanently, or their lives may end. I don't speak down to them. I think everybody's process is different. Everyone's journey or path is different, and it matters where people are and they're thinking about being connected or being disconnected. But I wouldn't attribute it to just kind of like a general sense, but more so kind of like what that person's exact story is or narrative for themselves.
So I want to get into the specifics. You're actually trying to seek people with lived experience to become mental health leaders in leadership roles that maybe other organizations would say, is it appropriate to have someone with lived experience in this system? How do you convince both the people involved and the people that would hire these young men and women eventually that this is who should be leading the mental health system, is people who have gone through this system before?
That's an interesting question. I'll be brief because I definitely want to hear from my brother Steve. I would say, in my sentiment, and I'm pretty sure Steve's like, bumping his fist to this too. I wouldn't say so much that we're raising the leaders of tomorrow for our behavioral health or mental health systems or any systems. I think first and foremost, we're helping young people tap into their sense of choice around their living. And I think what emerges from that is their sense of being a leader or having an influential role, and the circles and institutions and systems that intersect with their lives. And in this particular case, behavioral health, public health happens to be a part of those systems or institutions that intersect with them. And I think for the organizations that I feel like are becoming more transformative, and they have their own challenges in doing so, is being able to value kind of like different ways of knowing, different ways of learning, different ways of doing the deeper business of the work. You know what I mean? It's not just meeting kind of like quotas or aggregating data that makes the case for funding. It really is about getting into the right relational problems with our communities. And I'm one to believe that our organizations and our companies are catching up to kind of like the quantum leap that our communities have already taken. Our communities have left us behind, and we have to catch up to their humanity because we've faltered.
That's super cool.
And I believe that our young people serve as a great way to help us recover and get back into again, that deeper meaning, that deeper business of the work.
And so do you already have the people in this program, or are you still seeking people with lived experience to help actually lead this change?
Certainly building and finding new stories. I think if you don't mind, Sheila, I'd love to share a quick story that I think reflects what Shaheed's been
please do.
talking about.
Sure.
Great. So wonderful. So as a result of the Let's Lead program, Shaheed and I have been able to really like blossom in our relationship and build out our friendship and do work together. And most recently, we've come together and done some work with NAMI, which you are very likely familiar with.
Yes, of course.
National Alliance for Mental Illness. And we're recording two very unique stories. And I'll share, with that also like to be brief, I'll share the second story with you, and because I think it really speaks to what Shaheed's talking about in terms of like non-traditional. It's not. I don't think it's the typical way of scaling a leadership and advocacy program for the sake of like a system, but rather around relationships and a deeper meaning of community. Young guy that I've known for years, and Shaheed has known for years as well. His name is Naris. Naris lives in North Philly, and definitely faces a number of hurdles and issues faced by his community and his family specifically. He's had a few friends who lost their lives, unfortunately, and Naris is only 17 years old, and so he's in a tough spot. That being said, I had known him through our basketball mentorship program for a number of years, and really built a beautiful relationship. It was sane. We knew each other very well, but it was reserved to one space. It was reserved to the basketball North Philly region of Philadelphia. And more recently, we had an opportunity to reach out around this video production, and we invited Naris to join the team. And it was somewhat randomly because we had someone drop out, but nonetheless, he was super enthusiastic to get involved. More enthusiastic than I've ever seen him be on the basketball court. He not only came into the office, like eyes super big. Once he knew that we were going to start doing video production, saw the cameras, we went down to the studio. This young guy completely blossomed. I mean, like he opened up and unpacked a part of himself that I had never known, even though I had known him for close to 5 years and never heard him talk about, never really heard him reflect on, share with anybody, myself in particular, and be creative with it. You know what I mean? Like, he was iterating. He was, to Shaheed's point, he was finding new and bigger problems to take on with us, by himself, with his family. And it was really dynamic to see someone who, again, like, had known for so long, but again, to Shaheed's point, like, the deeper meaning of the relationship is inviting people to go deeper with me, to get to know me a little bit better, so I can get to know them a little bit better, and therefore the community becomes that much more rich. So I think between that and, you know, the number of other young folks, I actually have 2 young folks that we're meeting up with later on today to do something very similar. It's really, I think, and I think in the work that Shaheed and I have done, the dividends have come from really showing how vulnerability, story, and mental health and wellness is a two-way street. It's about relationships. You know, it's not about putting someone in a position as a token, but rather engaging them in a relationship and opening up.
No doubt. So I want to just give you each just a few moments in the closing here to just tell people how they can find you, how they can find out more about the Yale program for recovery and community health. I want to do our very best effort to try to get as many people involved and supportive of this program as we possibly can. So do you want to go first, Shaheed?
Sure. So you could look up Youth Move National, of which there's a link you could find in kind of like chapter resources or chapters around the country, and select Philadelphia as an option, and that would kind of like give you access to my information.
Well, that's helpful. And I'm just also going to add that we have great thanks to the Foundation for Excellence in Mental Health Care for connecting us with you, to telling us about your incredible program. I'm really impressed by both the passion and the eloquence you guys both bring to this topic, and just your personal stories are incredible. So hopefully maybe we'll have you as a guest on our regular show in the near future, because it's been a great, great pleasure to speak with you.
Likewise, having us has been such a privilege. I look forward to doing it again, and then also tuning in to kind of like the outstanding guests that you'll have on in the future.
Thanks again. We'd like to thank the Foundation for Excellence in Mental Health Care for the time today, this incredible topic. And if you want to learn more, you can click on the link right now. Once again, guys, thanks again for your time.
Thanks so much.